Hi, and welcome to the Candice Malcolm Show. I'm your host, Candice Malcolm. It is great to be with you today. We have a ton of news to get to. It was a very busy weekend in the world of news. And we're going to start by talking about Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who was down at Mar-a-Lago at Trump headquarters over the weekend. There were some photos circulating online. The Premier confirmed it, and then she spoke to reporters this morning. So we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about the insane reaction from some leftist politicians, including Melanie Joly, the Foreign Affairs Minister, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, and of course, our lame duck Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. We're also going to talk about Trudeau's embarrassing, pathetic American media interviews. And finally, we'll end the show talking to an Ottawa realtor who has been attacked by the thought police for the crime of free speech and wrong speak. So it's a great show, and thank you so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, leave us a 5-star review if you are listening to this podcast and you enjoy our content, and please head on over to tnc.news to sign up for our newsletter so that you never miss a story. Okay, so let's get to the news of the day, which is that Danielle Smith has had a meeting with Donald Trump, the incoming president-elect. So Alberta Premier Danielle Smith flew down to Florida. It wasn't disclosed. It was all sort of hush hush. No one really knew about it. Photos started circulating, and then all of a sudden it was confirmed, and we heard from the Premier herself. She's facing lots of criticism about it. So we'll get to it all. Basically, these photos circulated on Sunday morning. Someone posted that it appears that Kevin O'Leary, Danielle Smith, and Jordan Peterson were at Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump. And then Smith herself came out and said, yes, that the photos are real. They're not photoshopped. And she just said this: over the past 24 hours, I had the opportunity to meet President Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago at his golf club this morning. We had a friendly and constructive conversation during which I emphasized the mutual importance of the U.S.-Canada energy relationship, and specifically how hundreds of thousands of American jobs are supported by energy exports from Alberta. I was also able to have similar discussions with several key allies of the incoming administration. I was encouraged to hear their support for a strong energy and security relationship with Canada. On behalf of Albertans, I will continue to engage in constructive dialogue and diplomacy with the incoming administration and elected federal and state officials from both parties, and I will do all I can to further Alberta and Canada's interests. The United States and Canada are both proud and independent nations with one of the most important security alliances on earth and the largest economic partnership in history. We need to preserve our independence while we grow this critical partnership for the benefit of Canadians and Americans for generations to come. And you can see the photos that she included, her talking to Trump, her shaking his hand. They're looking very friendly, very happy. There's a photo of them the next morning at his golf course. It looks like Trump's about to play golf, and Danielle is wearing a beautiful white dress along with Kevin O'Leary's very sort of flamboyant Florida man outfit there. And then you can see the three of them talking. So very, very interesting development. Interesting to see these individuals in Trump's orbit. We've been hearing a lot from Kevin O'Leary sounding off about how Canadians should pay more attention to Donald Trump and try to strike some kind of a deal, some kind of a better partnership that will ensure greater freedom and economic opportunity for Canadians. So interesting that the Alberta Premier has been brought in on this orbit. And so what exactly happened? What exactly did they talk about? What went down? Well, Rick Bell, who is a post-media columnist, had a column that was posted late last night in the Calgary Herald. He's basically, it sounds like he had sort of an in-depth conversation with either Danielle or one of her closer aides, kind of detailing all the various meetings that they had and how it went down. So I'll read you a little bit from this Calgary Herald article here. It says, it's Saturday night, the evening of January 11th, around 9 p.m. Smith is at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's resort and headquarters, an out of this world Palm Beach, Florida resort, which will once again be Trump's winter White House. Some of the Trump big shots, a who's who is in the Trump world or in the house. We did see some photos circulating of people like Sylvester Stallone. Elon Musk was there. So, it wasn't just the few Canadians there. There were a lot of very powerful, important people. Rick Bell continues to say that Smith is there, and the premier is at a table just a few feet away from where the incoming US president will sit. When Trump and his family and his entourage arrive, he makes a beeline for Smith. He has obviously been told she is the premier of Alberta. Interesting. So Trump is in a room full of his closest confidants and friends, and Danielle Smith kind of seems like a guest of honor, to the point where when Trump enters the room, he goes straight to Danielle Smith, straight to her to try to make that introduction and to try to meet her. Wow, what a compliment. And what does that say about the way that Trump regards Danielle Smith? It sounds like he really respects her and holds her in high regards. It's a great thing for Alberta, a great thing indeed for Canada. So I'll continue reading here. It says, Smith, as you know, has recently been speaking nonstop about oil and gas and is no fan of tariffs. Trump says he plans to hammer Canadian goods going stateside with a 25% tariff, a 25% charge once they cross the border. Smith is on comfortable ground in Florida, at least as comfortable as you can be these days. The premier has made many well-reasoned appearances on Trump's favorite TV channel, Fox News, while Justin Trudeau is going on lefty MSNBC. She has talked to a whole bunch of movers and shakers in the Trump universe. This weekend, she was at Mar-a-Lago at the same time as psychologist and right-wing rock star Jordan Peterson, along with TV money man Kevin O'Leary. Smith is going to be in Washington, D.C. for the Trump inauguration. At the table, Smith and Trump have a conversation of around 5 to 10 minutes about energy, about oil and gas, about Alberta and Canada. Smith mentions how production of Alberta oil is ramping up in a big way, and that US buys a lot of Alberta oil. Smith asks if Trump wants more of our oil. Trump does. It is by far Canada's biggest export to the Americans. Reportedly, the exchange goes very well. Okay, he goes on. He says, then on Sunday, Trump plays a round of golf. Smith is invited to have lunch at his golf club, and Trump pulls Smith aside and they have another 5 to 10 minute conversation about energy. Smith puts out a statement Sunday. She's expected to speak with the news hounds on Monday morning. I was one of those news hounds on that call, so I'll get to that in just a minute. Rick Bell continues to say, the premier says that her time with Trump was friendly and constructive. She talked about how hundreds of thousands of American jobs are supported by Alberta energy going south. She confirms other discussions with several key players in Trump world. And she says, and this is key, she's encouraged to hear their support for a strong energy and security relationship with Trump. Now, no one knows where this will lead. This is continuing reading from Rick Bell's column. He says, no one knows where this will lead, but the smart money now bets if anyone is going to get a reprieve from Trump's tariffs, it will likely be the oil patch. Of course, nothing is certain. And just to clarify, Smith herself actually said that this is not going to happen when she spoke to reporters this morning. So I'll get to that in a second. But I don't think there's going to be any reprieve from these Trump tariffs, at least after hearing what Smith had to say. Just finally here from Rick Bell, it says, through it all, Smith has always followed the same playbook. No matter how the premier may be pushed and prodded to go scorched earth nasty against Trump, she has not done so. When other politicians and clickbait-hungry commentators have made a stratospherically big deal about Trump taking over Canada and making us a 51st state, Smith would not bite on low-hanging fruit. As mentioned in a previous column, Smith has insisted on serious conversation about how to get as many Canadian goods as possible untouched by the Trump tariff threat. The premier's people see no advantage in wetting their pants when dealing with Trump and his negotiating shtick. They're not setting their hair on fire or hyperventilating or posturing or running through the streets saying the sky is falling. Smith wants a deal, to use a little bit of Trump's lingo. And meanwhile, on the weekend, Trudeau and his crew on the CBC were already talking up retaliation plans against Trump's tariffs. And that's basically just not Smith's style. So here we see Danielle Smith going down to Florida, having a mature face-to-face, person-to-person discussion with Donald Trump, trying to find common ground, staying calm, having a cooler head, whilst basically all the other political leaders, mostly on the political left, are basically lighting their hair on fire and panicking in the face of Trump's threats. And so I wanted to commend Danielle Smith for going down there, for doing what needed to be done, right? You see, Justin Trudeau went down there a few weeks ago and seemed to make everything worse, right? Remember that all of those 51st state and Governor Trudeau, all those jokes came after Trump's trip down to Mar-a-Lago. So when Trudeau tried to go down to Mar-a-Lago to meet Trump, he blew it up and made it worse. Danielle Smith seems to go down there and garner respect and have FaceTime with Trump and have this sort of advancing conversation about mutual needs and Smith's dislike of tariffs. And from my perspective, what Smith is doing is far more effective, far more helpful for Canada than the whole shtick that Trudeau and the Liberal government are trying to do. So Smith came out this morning, Monday morning, and further clarified. She said that it was indeed a productive, friendly conversation with Trump, but she was clear. She was clear that tariffs are coming. So you can see I was live tweeting this press conference this morning. Premier Smith speaking to reporters about her meeting with Trump, calls the meeting friendly and constructive, but warned tariffs are coming. So she was pretty unequivocal about that. She said, no matter what, this guy is serious. These tariffs are coming. And let's just be clear, these tariffs are going to be devastating to our economy, like instant recession. Things are going to get very bad. And, the more conversations that we can have with Trump, the better. To go on, Smith criticized Justin Trudeau, saying that she's very concerned about the leadership vacuum. She was asked whether Trudeau's resignation is helpful. She repeated her call for an immediate election, sort of repeating what a lot have been saying, this whole prorogation of Parliament, waiting for a Liberal leadership race. It's not helping. This is an incredibly important time, a crucial time in our nation's history. We need a negotiator. We need someone there with a mandate. We need someone who can talk to Trump and say, I represent the people. And whatever you will say about Justin Trudeau, he doesn't have that mandate. He knows it, hence why he resigned. So we don't really have a leader of our country at this point. We don't really have a prime minister. And whoever the Liberals are going to select isn't going to have that mandate either. Trump will know that this person has not been elected by the Canadian people. It's a bad scenario that's about to get worse. The best thing that Canada can do, the best thing that Trudeau could ever do for Canada, is to just call an election, let the Canadian people choose a mandate, choose a leader to have a mandate, and that leader can go down and talk to Trump. So Smith just sort of reiterated that. This part was super interesting. She was asked about Melanie Joly. We're going to get to Melanie Joly's comments. Melanie Joly is sort of leaving the door wide open to a potential retaliatory tariffs and even an embargo on our oil, which would be disastrous. Danielle Smith made that clear. She said that basically Melanie Joly's idea, don't make empty threats. And if they were to pursue that option of an embargo, there would be a national unity crisis. Smith didn't mince her words. Actually, we have a clip of Danielle Smith responding to this question about Melanie Joly. So let's play that clip now.
Yesterday, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly talked about, she was asked specifically if in negotiations with Trump, Canada would consider an energy embargo on the United States. And I want to, as leverage, what do you think, what do you make of what she said?
Well, first of all, it's oil and gas that's owned by the provinces, principally Alberta, and we won't stand for that. And you should never, ever threaten something you cannot do. And I would encourage the minister to look at a map of where Line 5 goes. Line 5 comes down through Michigan to get to Sarnia. And then that feeds the bulk of the supply needed for Ontario and connects with Line 9, which feeds the bulk of the product needed for Quebec. And so if you cut off that line, you are cutting off Ontario and Quebec. So I would encourage the ministers to either understand how our integrated pipeline system works and start looking at ways that we would be able to practically respond, because there's no point in making empty threats that cannot be executed on.
So Danielle Smith, incredibly strong, incredibly firm. basically just putting Melanie Joly in her place. Like, don't threaten something that you can't do. Oil and gas is a provincial entity. It's provincial jurisdiction. Butt out, feds. And by the way, who's supplying your oil right now? Look at the pipelines. Look at the system, the infrastructure there. Wow. I wouldn't want to mess with Danielle Smith on this issue. And the federal government, Melanie Joly going out there talking about this, not a good look, as Danielle Smith points out. Smith also mentioned that in talks with Trump is interested in buying more oil and gas from Canada. He says, yes, he does want more. He's interested in purchasing more. Whereas this question of whether Alberta will be exempt, whether Smith was able to negotiate any kind of an exemption from Alberta, maybe they won't, that the oil coming from Canada won't get that 25% tariff. Smith just frankly said, no, we are not expecting any kind of exemptions, preparing the public for what is to come. Things are going to be bad. This is what happens when you have weak leaders. This is what happens when you have a federal government that's not even really there, that isn't upholding its end of the bargain or its responsibilities. There will be consequences. The consequences that Trump is talking about, it's going to be rough. It's going to be serious. Smith was incredibly forthright about that. And again, Smith is doing a heck of a lot more for Canada, advancing our interests, trying to find common ground with the incoming president, than some of Canada's other leaders, especially leaders on the federal stage, leaders who you would expect would have the calmness to pursue something that is best for Canada and not try to escalate the situation and make it worse. And I'm specifically right now talking about NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. This guy is just a total disaster again and again. Everything he's doing, it's like he's cosplaying the role of a federal leader. He has no idea how damaging this could be. The only saving grace is probably that no one will take this person seriously. No one in the US knows who he is or cares. He shouldn't hold the balance of power. He holds the balancing power of Canada right now. There is no reason why he should. He won't as soon as there is an election, and hopefully no one takes his fool seriously. Here is Jagmeet Singh. He put this video up on Sunday, playing Mr. Tough Guy, threatening Donald Trump, promising retaliatory tariffs, which would be absolutely devastating for the economy of Canada. You have no idea how bad this would be for Canada. Singh doesn't care. He just wants the clicks. He just wants attention. Here he is threatening Donald Trump. This is an absolute joke. Let's see this clip.
I have a message for Donald Trump. Our country's not for sale. Not now, not ever. I lived across this country, and I can tell you, Canadians are a proud people. We're proud of our country, and we're ready to fight like hell to defend it. Right now, with the forest fires ravaging homes, Canadian firefighters showed up. That's who we are. We show up and support our neighbors. But if you think you can pick a fight with us, there'll be a price to pay. I've committed that if Donald Trump imposes tariffs on us, we should respond with retaliatory tariffs in kind. I think that anyone running as Prime Minister should do the same.
Okay, Jagmeet Singh, sit down, be quiet. Okay, you're saying that Canadians are ready to fight like hell. What do you mean? What do you mean? Are you going to register and sign up for the military if Trump invades? When you say fight like hell, like what exactly do you mean? Slapping a retaliatory tariff will just make things even more expensive for Canadians. Tariffs aren't good on either side. And if Trump wants to impose those to send a message to Canada, maybe to increase our military spending, maybe to stop all of our own internal subsidies and regulations that make it unfair for us to trade with our partners. That should be a call to action for Canada to up its game, not to sink down even further and tax our own people, which is what a tariff does. So Singh, not helpful. Glad he's not very important. Glad no one's listening to him. Just demonstrating his own foolishness and ignorance. But he's not alone. He's not alone. He's in good company up there in the federal government with his alliance with the Liberals. Here we have the Liberal Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, and she sort of opens the door, keeps the door wide open when asked questions on the oil embargo. This is one that Smith was responding to earlier, but let's see this clip of Melanie Joly over the weekend on CBC just being completely irresponsible, talking about Canadian retaliatory measures.
So if these tariffs are applied as he has threatened them to be, which we don't know the case, he hasn't announced that, you know, the specifics of it, but he's saying 25%. I was interviewing 6 economists, the top 6 economists, the chief ones for all the big banks the other day. And collectively, they said the hit to the economy, we're looking to the tunes of millions of jobs. You're looking at a 3% contraction and essentially an immediate recession. So it's in that vein, against that backdrop, I ask you about what retaliation would look like. Is your government prepared to cut off supplies of energy, for example, to the United States?
What I can tell you is everything is on the table. And that's the conversation we will have, the Prime Minister, Minister LeBlanc, and myself, with the premiers next week. And that's a conversation also I'll take to Republican senators and key Republican decision makers in Washington next week. Because this is indeed a decision that would be taken by President-elect Trump that would have devastating impacts on Canadians. And so for those who are watching us right now, it is important to understand that the threat is real and we're acting on it. And that's why I'm calling every political leader in this country to be on board, because this is not time for division, this is not time for weakness, this is time of strength and unity.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable that these people are still going down to Washington to represent us, to represent Canadians. Because, I mean, what she said at the end there is obviously true. This is a big, big deal, and it's going to have a devastating impact on Canada. The reality is that any retaliatory tariffs or embargoes on our products won't have as big of an impact on the US as theirs will on us. We're a much smaller country. Their imports are much more important to our economy. And so, yes, a tariff war will hurt them, but it'll hurt us 10 times more. And so at a certain point, you just have to be realistic. And this whole no partisanship here, we all have to be on the same team, and it's a Team Canada approach. Spare me that nonsense, because we don't want you representing us anymore. Canadians don't want the Liberal government representing us anymore. You have gotten us into a horrible economic mess, and you should not be the ones down there representing us and trying to get out of it. We need an election. We need Canadians to determine who our government will be. And these Liberals out there, it's just unbelievable. No one wants her to represent us. And the idea that they're not going to close the door on any possible retaliatory measures is just brutal. It's just brutal, and it's not helping the situation. And speaking of Liberals not helping the situation, we saw plenty of Liberals hand-wringing and making accusations against Danielle Smith for the crime of even going down and talking to Donald Trump. So here we have a Liberal MP from Vancouver. His name is Talib Numan, and he says, sellout night, Canadian edition at Mar-a-Lago. So apparently just going down and talking to the president makes you a sellout. This is called diplomacy. But if you're a Liberal, seeing any conservative people, anyone right of center, go down and talk to the president, that is considered a sellout. What happened to no partisanship here? What happened to the Team Canada response? Robin Urbach of the Globe and Mail, a columnist of the Globe and Mail, she asks a simple question. She just says, I genuinely don't understand the attack here. Trudeau was at Mar-a-Lago a month ago. And then this Liberal MP replies, and he says, there are some key differences. Smith hasn't spoken out against the 51st state crap. Number 2, Peterson talks down Canada every turn. 3, O'Leary is advocating for integration with the U.S. PM Trudeau is Canada's PM and has been vocal in defending our independence, as have people from other parties like Doug Ford. Okay, so basically this guy just doesn't like these people because they are conservative. Like Kevin O'Leary is one of the few people who have been speaking very clearly and making a lot of sense when advocating a new relationship with the United States, and that's somehow dangerous. Peterson talks down Canada every turn. No, he's just talking about his experiences with your tyrannical government and how extreme the Liberal government in Canada has become. He doesn't talk down Canada. He loves Canada, and you can tell that when he talks about his upbringing and his time in Edmonton and his time in Montreal. He obviously is a proud Canadian, loves Canada. He's not talking down Canada. He's talking down the Liberal government. And as far as Smith not speaking out against the 51st state crap, well, that's actually not true. Danielle Smith had a very strong, very firm message when Trump first started making these comments. This is what she had to say just a few days ago on January 7th. She wrote this: Canada is a strong, independent nation with the 9th largest economy in the world, and our southern neighbor benefits from this economic strength. We are the United States' best customers. We buy more products and services from the US than any other single nation. And she goes on, I will continue to share with Americans the economic story Alberta has to tell. And that's why I will be in Washington during the inauguration. So actually, no, Smith has been very clear saying that Canada is a strong, independent nation. Liberal MPs just sort of choose to close their eyes and ignore all this. I'll just get to one more reaction here. This one comes again from Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader, talking about Danielle Smith's photo that she posted with herself and Donald Trump. He writes, "Nothing to see here, Canada. Just Canadian conservatives celebrating with Donald Trump and billionaires days after he threatened to annex Canada and just days before the launch of a full-scale assault on the Canadian economy, jobs, and your family." Again, Mr. Singh, this is called diplomacy. This is called diplomacy. This is what leaders are supposed to do. Donald Trump makes a threat. Canadian leaders go and try to talk him down from that, try to make the point that they have a good friendship with the United States, that we have a mutual relationship together, that we will all benefit from fewer tariffs and fewer barriers. That's diplomacy. That's why people like Danielle Smith represent us. That's why Danielle Smith has a heck of a lot more, a higher approval rating than Jagmeet Singh does. So again, just a bunch of brutal stuff from the Canadian political left, basically just so offended and upset by Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, by the way, is having none of it. So when it comes to this whole thing, Trump is basically just staying in his lane, saying the same thing that he has said, not really wavering here. Here is a clip of Donald Trump from a few days ago, basically just saying that all the stuff that Canada gives him, the United States doesn't need. So doubling down on this idea that he can go ahead with these tariffs and it won't really impact the United States very much. So let's play that clip.
We don't need Canada for lumber because we have big forests that we have, you know, not utilized. In some cases, they're protected, which I can take that protection off. And you take down a tree and you grow a better tree. That's, you know, pretty common. But we don't need anything. We don't need their fuel. We don't need their energy. We don't need their oil and gas. We don't need anything that they have. And I said to Trudeau, I said, why are we subsidizing you $200 and $250 billion a year? He said, I really don't know. And I said, well, I don't know either. I said, what would happen to Canada if we didn't? He said, Canada would be obliterated if that happened. I said, then Canada should be a 51st state.
And again, I mean, it's sad, but it's true. Canada is subsidized very heavily by the United States. You know, there's two things that have enabled Canadians to basically be run by socialists for the last, 40 or 50 years, several generations. And that is U.S. military protection and Alberta oil. Those two things have allowed the federal government in Ottawa to basically operate as a socialist state, growing ever bigger, ever more powerful, taking more and more and more of our money, distributing it from the entrepreneurs and the innovators and the wealth-producing part of the country and society, and putting it back into more and bigger government, more social programs, more socialism. And so the reality is, if it wasn't for those two things, the military and our oil and gas sector, Canada would be Venezuela. Canada would be a failed state. And so at the same time, it's like, look, you have to realize that the United States doesn't have to provide that military protection if they don't want to, if they don't feel that they're getting the best deal when it comes to economic partnerships, when it comes to the many, many regulations and subsidies that Canada has. It is very much in their right to stop that military protection, or at least to say you have to pay your fair share, you have to pay more of it. And at the same time, these socialists who run the Canadian government, who have managed Canada and basically driven our economy into the ground. At every opportunity, they bash Alberta, they bash the oil sands, they bash a conservative leader like Danielle Smith. So it's all just a bit rich. And frankly, their whole house of cards is going to come tumbling down when Trump comes into office. And from Danielle Smith's press conference, it does sound indeed like on January 20th, this is one of the many executive orders that Trump will administrate immediately. There will be no exemptions, even with the friendship that Danielle Smith seems to have been forging with President Trump. There will be no exemptions for oil, for energy. It will be across the entire economy. It will be devastating. And I mean, we have to prepare for that. But we also need to demand accountability and action from our federal leaders. We need an election. We need an election. That's the only position that we should be taking over and over. The Canadian people should be demanding that Trudeau step aside for real, call an election for real, not a Liberal leadership race, an election to the Canadian public so that we can decide who should govern us. That's just probably not going to happen. Justin Trudeau was doing the media rounds over the weekend. So we showed you some clips of him on CNN on Friday. Well, he was also on MSNBC over the weekend, sitting down with Jen Psaki, who was Joe Biden's former press secretary, just a very, very partisan left-wing person over on MSNBC, the most left-wing of left-wing news stations in the U.S. It's kind of like their CBC, not as bad because it's not government funded, but just as nauseating. And so here is Justin Trudeau just completely speaking into the abyss, just talking to himself. No one's really should be paying attention to this guy at this point. First, he says that Trump's 51st state comments was actually just flattery about Canada. Let's play that clip.
Do you think is this bullying? Is it trolling? Or should we not take seriously his expansionist desires?
No. I think we definitely need to take that seriously. I think from my very first conversations with him way back in 2016, he told me how much he admires Canada, how much he appreciates and likes us. So I think there is a certain amount of flattery in this, that he thinks that we are as great as we are. He's right. We are great. We're also very, very proud of being Canadian. If you talk to any Canadian, you ask them to define what it is to be a Canadian, they'll talk about all sorts of different things. But one of the things we will point out is, and we're not Americans.
My goodness, what do you even say about a man like that? Like, he totally misreads what Donald Trump is doing. He's saying it's flattery that Trump wants Canada. Well, Justin Trudeau, let me just tell you something. He doesn't want Canada because of you. He doesn't want Canada because of the culture that you think is so great and superior to the United States, the Canada that you see. No, he wants our minerals. He wants our resources. That's what he wants. He wants the things under the ground. Maybe when it comes to Canada, yeah, there's some great people. Probably wants the hardworking ones of the bunch, the innovative entrepreneurial stuff. But in the same clip, you see he says that it's flattery that Trump likes Canada so much. And then like 10 seconds later, when he's talking about what it means to be Canadian, he goes, "We're not American." Like looking down his nose at the American public, like, we Canadians, we think we're so much better than you. Again, and he can't even define Canada. Like, he defines Canada as just being not American, which is not enough. It doesn't mean anything. It's not universally held belief in Canada that the thing that makes us Canadian is that we're not American. That doesn't even mean anything to me. So again, Trudeau, just stop, man. Just go home, pack it up, stop pretending to represent us. I think that this whole trip of Trudeau going on CNN and MSNBC was much more about Trudeau and preserving his legacy and making friends and making inroads and trying to save his own narcissistic career. It doesn't really have anything to do with promoting Canada's interests and trying to get into Trump's good books, which is what Danielle Smith is doing. So this whole thing has just been a fail. Got another clip of Trudeau here with Jen Psaki suggesting that Canada could maybe trade for Vermont or something. Trade what exactly? Not so clear, but let's play this clip.
I'm assuming he didn't bring up his intention to publicly say he was going to annex through economic means your country.
It actually sort of came up at one point, and then we started musing back and forth about this. And when I started to suggest, well, maybe there could be a trade for Vermont or California for certain parts, he immediately decided that it was not that funny anymore, and we moved on to a different conversation. So this isn't out of the blue that he's doing this. But my focus has to be not on something that he's talking about that will not ever happen, but more on something that might well happen, that if he does choose to go forward with tariffs that raise the cost of just about everything for American citizens, that on top of that, we're going to have a robust response to that.
So just kind of an interesting tidbit there. He said that he brought the joke and said that they would want to trade certain parts of Canada for Vermont or California. I wonder what parts he might have been talking there. What part do you think that Trudeau would be willing to trade? What part of Canada do you think that Trudeau would be willing to get rid of and trade for Vermont or California? Kind of telling there, rather than just talking about how we're a one united country and we all stand in unison. And, Canada is a great country, different than the United States. He's there kind of suggesting that, maybe I'll just get rid of some of these pesky conservative voting parts of the country and trade them for more left-wing political constituents in places like Vermont or California. That could almost be seen as selling out parts of the country. What do you think? Oh, and by the way, if Trudeau did ever want to follow through with that and trade those conservative voting parts of the country, they also happen to be the most productive parts of the country. So if that were to ever happen, not that it would, but if it were to ever happen, Canada would fold even quicker. Canada would be seeing a recession, probably something that they could never recover from. So not a very funny joke. No wonder, even according to Trudeau's own retelling of the story, that Trump wasn't really interested in having that conversation with Trudeau. Not very funny. Final bit that I want to share from that clip on MSNBC. Trudeau, again, he did this with Jake Tapper on CNN on Thursday, which we played on the Friday show. If you haven't seen that show already, it was our first show back for myself this year, and after my maternity leave first show in, I think, about 8 or 9 months. But anyway, Trudeau is failing to take any kind of responsibility for the fact that he's gravely unpopular, refusing to take any kind of responsibility or accountability for the way that the Canadian economy is now in shambles, the way that Canadian society is in shambles. There's a unity crisis. There's social strife and cultural strife due to unchecked mass immigration. He doesn't want to talk about any of that. He just blames his unpopularity on other things. With Jake Tapper, he was blaming it on the right-wing parties and social media misinformation and disinformation. Here, he blames his unpopularity on what he calls an anti-incumbent wave, like a global trend that has nothing to do with him or Canada. Let's play that clip.
Also said when you resigned that you wanted to give your party a chance to win. So I think from your perspective, I'm wondering, is it more of a global trend issue in terms of where your approval ratings are now, which is the lowest they've been in your nearly 10 years? Or is it a you issue, as people should understand it?
Well, I think it's probably a bit of everything. I mean, right now there's a political cycle where incumbents, particularly those who steered us through COVID, I mean, Canada did extraordinarily well through COVID, better than just about every other peer, tens of thousands fewer deaths proportionately than our friends and allies around the world. Inflation hit less hard. Our economy bounced back faster. It was good, but there is still a lingering frustration towards incumbents. And for me, where I lean in on is all the good things we were able to do. We've put forward policies that are going to make a difference for decades to come in Canada. And I think right now we're seeing a time in politics where emotions and social media is carrying an awful lot of weight in how people feel about things. But I'm always going to lean back on what are the substantive things that are being done? What are the substantive measures that make a big difference in people's lives? And standing up for the vulnerable, supporting people who need it, building an economy that works for the middle class. These are things that ultimately make the biggest difference in people's lives.
Just absolutely. What can you say to that? What could you say to someone who's so unaware, has the lack of self-awareness that they really just think that everything they did was good? We just have to wait because his policies are going to do good in the next 10 and 20 years. And that's how it helps. That's how socialism works. Forget about, ignore your lying eyes in front of you. Forget about the fact that you can't afford your mortgage or that you can't afford groceries or that everything is so expensive because of his carbon taxes. Forget about the crime. Forget about how unsafe you are in your neighborhood because of mass unchecked immigration and our revolving door prison systems. Just forget all that. It's just a global trend. It's just anti-incumbent wave. This guy has absolutely no self-awareness, and it is absolutely pathetic. I wanted to go back to one other comment that Trudeau made. This will be the last clip I share of Justin Trudeau, I promise. I know so many people in the audience just cringe and say, Candice, stop playing so many clips of Trudeau. We don't want to hear him. We don't like him. We don't want to see his face and hear his voice anymore. I agree, my friends, not too much longer, not too much longer until we don't have to play these clips in the news any longer. Just one other comment, because we know that our friends down in Los Angeles and in Southern California are being hit with an absolutely unreal crisis and tragedy with the out of control fires, the Santa Ana winds blowing down through there and just creating catastrophe. The images and videos have been absolutely devastating. And in the midst of all that, again, talking about diplomacy, right? There's Danielle Smith out there trying to make inroads in a friendship with Donald Trump. And here we have Justin Trudeau, smarmy, snivelly guy. And what does he do? He talks about climate change. He's talking about these fires, and he goes back to his shtick, trying to say that this is all the fault of oil and gas and that we need more climate policies in order to stop it. It's just so cringe and embarrassing. This is a clip from him last Thursday on CNN with Jake Tapper.
I've been back and forth texting with Governor Newsom. We've offered a tremendous amount of equipment that they're already accepting. There's expertise. There's things that we're having to do to deal with together as we, of course, respond to these fires, but also know that climate change means they're going to get steadily worse, and we have to keep stepping up on fighting climate change too.
A lot of people out there might say, what does climate change have to do with this? Explain.
Well, when the summers get drier, when weather gets hotter, when weather patterns shift, communities that were built in a place that never saw fires are suddenly seeing fires much more frequently. There's a shift in everything that means even what we see now is going to just get worse and worse and worse over the coming decades if we're not serious about reducing our emissions and looking for ways to protect our future generations.
That makes no sense, Justin Trudeau. What you just said makes no sense. He said that summers are hotter and drier. Can someone point our Prime Minister to a calendar? Can someone point out that it is January? It has nothing to do with a hotter or a drier summer when we are in the middle of winter. And he's talking about how the weather patterns have gotten worse. The Santa Ana winds go down through the Los Angeles hills. That has been happening. That has existed for hundreds of years, probably thousands of years. Okay, this is nothing new. These fires are nothing new. There's out of control fires in Southern California every single year. They usually peak in around October. They get very, very bad. It is because of these winds and these fires. And this is nothing new. So Justin Trudeau is just so out of depth here. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. He doesn't have specific knowledge about these fires. He's saying that communities that were built places have to adjust because of the changing climate patterns. That's just not true. That's just not true. And Justin Trudeau, just keep quiet. Don't talk about things that you don't understand. He's always on a soapbox, always trying to push his leftist agenda, always trying to defend his terrible policies. This one, a carbon tax. It's just cringy and it has to stop. But on the topic of Canada helping out our friends in California and in Los Angeles, Canada did supply some bomber planes that have been used to help fight those fires in California. And let me just say, watching these firefighters, watching these incredibly brave men out there maneuvering, what they're able to do to put out these terrifying fires is just the absolute height of bravery. It is truly incredible to see. So I want to play a clip of a Canadian bomber doing its job, doing what it can to help fight these fires in California. So it really is incredible there, what they do. And I have a bit of a montage here, a bit more clips. These ones aren't Canadians, aren't necessarily Canadian planes or pilots, but just in general, completely brave individuals flying these planes, these incredible maneuvers that they're doing, working incredibly hard to put out the fire. There's so many horrible news stories, so devastating what is happening down there. So it's nice to put a little bit of a positive spin and see something good out of it. And I think these images, these displays of heroic masculinity and men doing incredibly brave and dangerous things for the betterment of their community, the betterment of society, to protect women and children and their community. We don't pay enough attention. We don't praise it enough. So let's play this montage of just amazing clips from that fire. amazing, incredible stuff. There's another footage that I saw that didn't make it into that clip, but it was basically of one of those bombers collecting water from the Pacific Ocean in order to use to pour onto the Pacific Palisades fire. And it's just incredible. It's like a huge plane, and you imagine what it takes to land like on choppy Pacific Ocean, right? To fill up the barrel with water to go use that to put out the fire. I mean, it just takes incredible precision to be able to maneuver a large aircraft like that. And it truly is incredible. So hats off to those heroes. And we pray for the people of Los Angeles, pray for the brave firefighters helping to put out those fires, and for everybody involved. Okay, I want to end the show on a bit of a different note, bring it back home to Canada, and a story that I read in True North. It was just absolutely incredible to me. The story of an Ottawa realtor who has had his license revoked by basically a tyrannical board. So the story here is of an individual named Mark Papineau, who's been a realtor in Ottawa for 14 years, and yet the Ottawa Real Estate Board has banned him from doing business. What was his crime? Well, he mildly criticized Gay Pride Month, and he said that gay pride parades are not appropriate for children, instead saying that it was much more appropriate for us to be spending more time honoring our veterans and our troops, asking why is it that we only have one day to honor our veterans, honor the brave men who fought for Canada on D-Day, whereas we have an entire month for gay pride. Well, I spoke with Mark earlier this morning to get the full story, and here is what that interview looks like. Mark, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I'm just so blown away by this whole ordeal. It's kind of scary what can happen when sort of a group of individuals deem that you've said something that they don't agree with. So why don't you just walk the audience here through the story and what has happened to you?
Sure. Thank you. So it was about a year and a half ago, I believe. And you could actually see if anybody ever goes back and sees my post. There was a picture that was circulating around that was like a picture of a man holding a shield over his family, and it was a rainbow. And it's funny because a whole group of my friends had sent it to me privately, and you see in my post was the first I said, "There, I did it." And ironically, the reason why I did that is because I was kind of, why are you guys sharing this privately? And why don't you just share it publicly? If this is something that truly bothers you, why are we hiding in the shadows? So I said, you know what? I'll go first. So the purpose of that picture was really just to say that you're protecting your family against a narrative that you may disagree with. Something that I want to make clear is that I'm a father first before all things. And I take my family seriously. And my role as a father is to provide and to protect. And there are particular things that are being said in our school systems that I disagree with. And I'd heard there were some grumblings that this was moving into our area. And I wanted to voice my concern that certain things were being shared in the curriculum that were bothering me. But it kind of rolled into, as you see the post, and people can go back and read it, there's just certain things that I felt were going on in our society at the peak of this that I felt was inappropriate. And I felt like Pride Month was long, and it was constantly being extended, Pride Month. And I'm like, okay, what is it, Pride Year? I totally understand that people can have their lifestyle and do whatever it is that they want to do. I have no issues with that. But there is a point where if it's out in the open for everybody to see, you're going to expect people to have an opinion, and you can't force people to not be able to speak. Ironically, when I mentioned the veterans, we have the right to speak that was paid for by the blood of our veterans. And I think that we should stand on that right and to exercise that right to pay respect to their sacrifice. So I choose to use my voice.
And just to let the audience know, because I haven't read it to them yet, but I mean, you should go check this out. It's something that you articulate well. And I see this sort of sentiment a lot online. A lot of people feel this way. Why is it that we only have one day to honor the veterans that died, say on D-Day, that died for our freedom, that were killed on the beaches of Normandy during World War II to help protect our freedom? They get one day. Whereas Pride, to your point, it started out as maybe Pride Week. Now it's Pride Month. It's like every corporation in Canada, every bank, every like telecom company, they're all leaning so much into it. And, that's one thing. But another thing is going to these pride parades where you make the point where, if you go to a movie, they'll say it's PG-13 or it's rated R if there's mild sexual content. Whereas, we're all encouraged to go to these pride parades where there's a lot of nudity. There's a lot of exhibitionists. There's a lot of values that don't really align with the values of most families, and certainly not something that you would want your kids to see. So I didn't have any kind of problem with your post at all. You even make clear that you have no problem with gay people, and that you might even go to a drag show with your wife. You just wouldn't want your kids there.
That's right.
I feel differently. I would never go to a drag show, but to each their own, right? To each their own.
Yeah.
And yet, so tell us, Mark, like what happened with your professional organization? So you're a realtor in Ottawa, and walk us through sort of the difference between these boards and what the ruling was against you.
Yeah. So I had an overwhelming level of support from the community, my fellow realtors as well, even more so now. But what happened is there was a crusade that was started by a particular group of individuals, of whom I will not name, but they decided that they were going to band together and to have me canceled. So what they did is they made several complaints to the different bodies that I'm part of. One of them is the federally regulated body, of which the responsibilities of regulation are passed off into the province, such as the Real Estate Council of Ontario. And then the other body they made a complaint to is the local board that I'm a private member of, which is the Ottawa Real Estate Board. So the Real Estate Council of Ontario's mandate is just this. They are the regulators. They have a team of lawyers, and they review our conduct, depending on complaints, how we deal with the public and how we deal amongst each other in order to ascertain if there's any wrongdoing that takes place. Now, they received the complaint, and they deemed that my personal profile of where I made the post was a private post. That was a private page. And they said, well, there's no real hate speech there either. So they basically sent a letter, said, hey, sorry, this isn't really our mandate. Mark's personal life is not our mandate. So we're going to just step back from that. Then the Ottawa Real Estate Board decided, hey, you know what? No, we disagree. And we're going to take this standard and we're going to plant it. And we're going to just make an example of Mr. Papineau. So their mandate truly is to facilitate MLS access for realtors. They provide a service. They don't have a team of representatives that are qualified to review any of these types of issues. That's why RICO exists. But they've made it a point to regulate realtor speech because within their bylaws, they have a rule as a private member board that they reserve the right to regulate our speech both in and outside of our professional capacities. So within their board mandate, they've given themselves that authority to do so. The issue now becomes, if a private member board gives itself the right to do this, and if they disbar me access, then they withdraw my capacity to earn a living, which is another infringement of my charter rights. So fundamentally speaking, they can say, yes, we have a right within our bylaws that gives us the capacity to exercise judgment on Mark, of which they banned me for life, by the way. Now, there's a technicality on that. They issued some heavy fines in this course I have to take. And then I went through some financial hardship. I had some construction projects that went bad. The market obviously hasn't been great. And it kind of snowballed, which is fine. I'll recover and all is well. But financially, it's been tight. So I wasn't able to pay for some of the program at the time that they said I should pay it. I tried to work a solution with them and they said, if you can't pay, beat it. We never want to see you again. They were waiting for me to make a mistake to get rid of me, to be honest.
Wow. And so you had to take basically a mandatory diversity training course, like some kind of a re-education camp to try to change your mind when it comes to whether or not children should be exposed to male genitalia on the streets during Pride Month. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about that diversity training?
Yeah, so I haven't taken the course yet. I believe that the specific course is called an ethics course. And ironically, like when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I went to college to become a police officer. As you can see from my demeanor, I believe in people's rights. I believe in a free society, and I believe in a controlled society. And what I mean controlled is we have to abide by the laws and the rules and regulations, but we also have a right And we have our charter that protects our personal freedoms to make sure that we can walk freely within a society and to speak. Now, I took years of ethics classes in my police training that I graduated from. So I'm very well averse with ethics are, and I understand them at a very high level. So to be re-educated because of my personal views, it feels very Orwellian to me, and it's shocking. I'm a little bit confused. I'll be honest.
To be honest, it doesn't sound like your charter rights are being upheld. Is this something you're looking to pursue legally against this board, or what are your options here, Mark?
I absolutely am reviewing my options against the board, the members behind the decisions, as well as the people who participated in the crusade. And my number one motivation is that they cannot give themselves the power. Now, so many people have reached out to me since this has happened, and they're kind of like, this is crazy. I can't believe this. And my response to everybody is, how can you be surprised? Evil happens because evil people do evil things, and good people stand and do nothing in the face of evil. So of course you're going to have an environment where people do bad things in a society where we're pacified. And North Korea didn't happen in like a day where the guy said, hey, I'm now in charge, and now people are sitting in stadiums. They're not even allowed to smile when they're watching a performance. That's how crazy it gets. But that happened rule by rule, day by day. I heard Jordan Peterson mention that before. I'm a huge follower, and I love his content. I don't agree with everything he says, but a lot of what he says. And it just comes down to, you have to be able to speak. So I'm going to be pursuing these people in whatever capacities I have, whatever options I have available to me. I'm looking at my options.
Great. Well, I mean, what's happening to you does sound a little bit like what is happening to Jordan Peterson. And to me, it's disturbing because it's not just government bodies, right? This real estate board is a private body. So you see how people with this mindset that you can't disagree, that there's no such thing as free speech, how they maintain power. They gain power in little pockets of society, and then they impose this. Why, your friends are happy to share this kind of a meme privately. No one wanted to say it publicly because of what you're going through. So I just want to say, Mark, I salute you for your bravery, for standing up for free speech. If any of our audience or listeners wants to learn more about your story, or if anyone's selling a house in Ottawa and they want to use you to represent them, where can folks find you?
Yeah, I mean, they could send me an email to mark@teamtoday.ca, and that'll give them the ability to reach out to me. They can go on, I believe you guys posted a news article. There's, I believe, maybe a link of a GoFundMe that's going to go on there as well if people want to support, because legal causes are not cheap. And I'm definitely going to need some support from the community on that one, because I'm not fighting this for me. I'm doing this for society. I'm doing this for this nation. I love this country. I love what our veterans have done. I love who we are. And I think that we just need to flex a little bit to get back to where we should be.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Mark Papineau, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for talking.
And just one more thing from that interview for the audience. So Mark was fined $4,000 from the Ottawa board. And on top of that, he had to pay $1,158 from his own pocket to attend that ridiculous diversity course offered by the regulator. It is such a farce. It is so unbelievably Orwellian, the speech codes that have been imposed in our country. We really have our work cut out for us to ensure and to bring back and restore a free society in Canada. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. We'll be back again tomorrow with all the news. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Candice Malcolm. God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow.